Good morning, Bermuda race fans. This is Dobbs Davis giving you your daily race analysis for the 2014 Newport Bermuda race. Here on the tracker, you can see our fleet has made some progress down the track, but it's still been light going over the past 24 hours. Let's just look, if we will, at where everybody was yesterday. Backing this up to just about this time for our last broadcast. Scrolling this down a bit here. You can see that the group was still fairly bunched up. Everybody going a little bit slow. The leaders broke out of the pack a little bit, but we're not making great progress back then. However, over the last 24 hours, the fleet has started to spread out a bit, but look at those tracks. Still a lot of variation in course headings, not very fast breakaway speeds. Little bits of back and forth. I'm looking in particular at some of these boats here. Grundoom, Constellation, the TP-52 from the U.S. Naval Academy. But just in the last few hours, the leaders have started to break free a little bit more, while those back up in the pack here are still struggling a bit and may still have struggled a little bit this morning. Now, we're still in our 4-hour delay on the tracker. That will turn off later today, but as of this morning, Sunday, we're still seeing quite some slow speeds in the middle of the pack, lots of variations in heading. It's still light air. In fact, just looking at the data that we have at hand in the last 24 hours, the leaders here, which include Shockwave, the Mini Maxi, Reichel Pubo, Bellamente, and Cool Allay. I finally figured out how to pronounce that boat properly. These boats that are more or less mini maxi size, Bellamente is a little bit larger. They've just broken away, going a little faster now, but they only did about 130 miles in the last 24 hours, which for these boats is quite slow conditions indeed. The website, actually, if we go to here for a moment, the website has some great blogs on there. Chris Musler is embedded on the Grundoom team, and he's written a great story at what life is like on board and where they are relative to their surrounding boats. So I invite everybody to tune into that. There'll be daily posts from Chris and others that are sailing on board, but it gives you a sense of what life is like. It's been slow going, has not been rough, but certainly a lot of concentration and perhaps a bit of frustration amongst some of these teams. So why is that? Let's look a bit here, go over the weather forecast. So this is, I'll go back a bit here for our current analysis. So our Bermuda race track starting in Newport, going down here to Bermuda. You can see pretty wide isobar spacings, not a lot of activity at all. Now, what's a little bit deceiving is these isobar spacings for this analysis are actually at 2 millibar, not 4 millibar spacings. So you have to look at those used to looking at weather maps might think that's a lot of breeze. In fact, it's not very much at all. The next feature that's coming into play will be down here at around 35 to 37 north as a weak frontal boundary. So as the teams get further south, they're going to get into the clouds, get in a little bit of weather here. The projections are for that weather, if we look forward, now this is 1800 UTC, that's 1800 Greenwich Mean Time. So remember that Eastern Daylight Time is 4 hours off of that, 4 hours behind that. So this will be early afternoon, more or less, in the projections. The lead teams will be getting into this system. The trailing teams might be starting to get a little bit better breeze as they approach it. And if we go forward into tonight, the system moves slightly south, so it's a bit receding away as the boats head south. Still coming into the back of it. The projections are from the folks at Commander's Weather to have as much as 20 or 30 knots coming into this system. Breeze out of the northeast, which will be interesting, and that might come into play for the Gulf Stream. We'll go into that in a moment. But then south of the front, about similar wind speeds, however, a big shift coming from the southwest, and then that diminishing as they get further south. Back to our tracker here. Now, what I think is going on in the last few hours is that these lead boats, which are starting to see some boat speeds that are 9 knots, another 9 knots, another 8.2 knots. These boats are starting to break away. Some of that is wind. I think they're approaching the frontal system and therefore picking up a little bit of boat speed. But also, let's go to the current here. Now, keep in mind these boats are now at about 37 degrees north. And here on our current analysis, 37 degrees north coincides, as you can see, with that meander, more or less with that meander of the Gulf Stream. So my sense is that the boats early this morning, the lead boats, are starting to get into this positive flow associated with the meander. That's pushing them south. My guess is that the frontal boundary, which is down somewhere in this area right now, is not producing the wind that we're seeing generate the boat speeds. Now that boat speed is speed over the bottom. It's not speed through the water. So I'm guessing that they're getting a help of 2 or 3 knots just from getting into this limb of this southerly meander. As the other boats in the pack, which are up here, break free of that warm eddy, because I think that's probably playing havoc a little bit with some of the slower boats up in here. As they break free and get into this, we'll see their speeds increase. But that frontal boundary is down in this area here. Early in the race or before the race, it was thought that this might be quite a rough Gulf Stream crossing because of the coincidence of that frontal boundary with the Gulf Stream, but right now the projections are showing that it's a little bit further south. Now that doesn't mean that it won't be rough in this area as they get into the southern part of the Gulf Stream, or that frontal boundary might not migrate north just a little bit. So some boats that I wanted to point out that I think are doing pretty well. If we look at our leaderboard, these are our line honor boats. So these are the first to finish boats in order of their distance away from Bermuda. The DTF, distance left to sail, distance to the finish, and then distance sailed. You can see that the lead boats are only about halfway through the track, and we're in Sunday morning, so it's well off any kind of record pace like we saw 2 years ago. The recent boat speeds are not bad. They're getting, and they will be getting better. But the one thing to show here that I think is important is this feature here in this column, this data, is estimated finish time. Now this is based on the recent boat speed figures divided into what distance they have left. So these ETAs will continue to change, but they're just based on this data coming from the yellow brick trackers divided into the distance. So this will change quite a bit. You can't take this literally because as the speeds change, this number will change continually. But here's our top 3, top 4 and 5. Pretty much as expected, these are the fastest boats in the fleet. Shockwave Bellamente, Cool Constellation, I think this is a good story here. This is the U.S. Naval Academy's team. John Tahansky's the coach. He's on board. They're doing a great job. They've been trading spots quite a bit with Grundum, although now they've jumped out ahead a little bit, but this gives a performance benchmark for the Grundum guys. If we go to corrected time, again, this is an IRC scoring, not an ORR. The main trophies in the race are with ORR scoring. We had some swaps around. Yesterday we saw the Dorade doing well in corrected time, as well as Carina. Now we've got other boats up here. Bodacious Santa Cruz 52, Reindeer is a Morris 47. Orion, the Merchant Marine Academy guys are on board that boat. That's a Club Swan 42. But Vamp, J44, doing well in corrected time. Lenny Sitar and his team. So this is interesting. Now this is all recent. If we look from the start, that changes a bit with some other players in here who are showing well in corrected time at this stage. But of course, this is very early days. We're less than halfway through the race for these teams. They've got a long way to go, and it's going to be another difficult day for them out there until they get a little further south and get into the weather. So just closing this out if we can. I think, again, the interesting aspect of this is just how the bulk of the fleet hasn't really changed much. You can see that they made progress when they came down that limb of the warm eddy and then just stopped. If you look at the bulk mass of the fleet here, they just have had a frustrating last 12 hours or so, and only those that are closer to run line, a little bit further down to the southeast, have kind of broken free of this log jam. This, of course, will break free a little later today, but it must have been a pretty frustrating past 24 hours for a lot of those teams in the fleet. So that concludes my analysis of today. I think it'll be very interesting over the next 24 hours as the boats break free, as they get down the track. This 4-hour delay in the tracker will turn off and it'll become real time. So I invite everybody to come back to the tracker and have a look. I will just show one other aspect, and I showed this yesterday. This is the currents. Again, you can't take this too literally. I think this is fairly schematic, but it does help illustrate this breakaway feature that we're starting to see in the fleet. It's more or less representative of what we see in this analysis. I don't think it's exact, but it helps understand why these boats, the lead boats that have started to pick up speed, even Constellation here at 7 knots, but Grundoon back here at 5.7, you can see that the explanation may be, and of course those little jogs over there in the tracks may be because of this current feature, and then getting into that the beginning of that southerly meander. So I will wrap this up for today. Thanks for joining us for Sunday. Please come back and look at the tracker, follow your favorite teams of the fleet, and we'll see you tomorrow morning.